Hey, what's up? This is going to be the final build update video for my Poison SRS Scion that I league started with. I know we're well past league start by now, but this character has been finished for a while and I just haven't had time to release the video until now. This was overall probably my strongest league starter ever. The only real contender with it is Archmage Stormbrand back in Delirium League, which doesn't really work the same way anymore. This build cleared all 4 Voidstones and every invitation except the Feared on a shoestring budget before I even switched to Poison, just using regular Fire SRS. And then as soon as I switched to Poison, which took about 10 Divine initial investment, it cleared the Feared very easily, and with just a little more investment it could comfortably take on all Ubers, and now that I've basically min-maxed it, it can absolutely mow through Ubers and everything else. The footage in the background right now is Uber Sirus using my current setup, and I'll show an Uber Shaper later at the end of the video. This build has really gone the distance. It cleared all Ubers, cleared Wave 30 Simulacrum, all easily, and hit level 100 naturally, just solo mapping. I didn't do any sort of power leveling rotations whatsoever. I even leveled the latter half of 99 to 100 in 100% Delirious maps just to see if I could, and it was no problem. I haven't really done any delve yet, but I'm very confident this could delve past depth 1000 very easily. I've done plenty of full Sanctum runs and hit rank 2000 in Trial of the Ancestors easily. So if you like having a single character that can tackle all content on a reasonable budget that isn't really specialized for any one thing, this is exactly that kind of character. When we look at the character closer, keep in mind that while I've invested a lot into this character now, it was more than capable of clearing everything, including Ubers, on much less optimized gear and gems. And I'm just going to let the rest of this Uber Sirus fight play out before we get into the rest of the video, so if you just want to skip ahead to the build breakdown, you can skip ahead about 30 seconds. Now let's take a look at the character and POB. It's not too far off from the theoretical POB that I posted before League start, but I've optimized basically everything I can. I have all of my fully leveled Awakened gems and alternate quality gems. You don't need the Awakened gems at all, but they are nice to have. Having a white socket in my main setup here allows me to swap out my weakest support gem, which is Void Manipulation, for melee splash while mapping. The main 6-link is SRS, minion damage, multi-strike, unbound ailments, unleash, and void manipulation. But again, don't worry about the awakened gems. You can also use Withering Touch instead of void manipulation too, especially if you aren't fully poison capped yet. I'm using Divergent SRS currently for extra damage on bosses, but I actually like default quality SRS better while mapping because they move much faster and clear way faster. I managed to get enough mana reservation efficiency to squeeze in Aspect of the Spider, so now for auras I'm running Malevolence, Determination, Tempest Shield, Haste, and Aspect of the Spider. And then I have Envy, which comes from Severed in Sleep, and it's supported by Divine Blessing and Generosity, so this doesn't take any reservation. It's just a temporary aura that I cast. It lasts about 20 seconds. Actually, it lasts 24 seconds. And when I do Trial of the Ancestors or Sanctum, I swap out Tempest Shield for Divergent Skitterbuts for a really big passive chill that stacks with the passive slow from Aspect of the Spider. It makes those league mechanics way easier. Skitterbuts does have a higher reservation cost than Tempest Shield, so I do have to turn off another aura or play around with some reservations. Usually I would just turn off either Haste or Determination, depending on what I'm doing. Like, I'll turn off Determination in Sanctum because it doesn't really do anything. Something I mentioned in my original video was using Phantasmal Leap Slam on this build. I really like Phantasmal Leap Slam on any build that uses Ashes of the Stars and a weapon compatible with Leap Slam, because you get a lot of extra speed from the quality from Ashes, which means it can be a reliable movement skill even on a 1-link. This build isn't stun immune, so I'm using Molten Shell and Stone Golem with Cast When Stunned. As a reminder, Cast When Stunned also works when you block a stunning hit, and this build is block capped against attacks and spells without glancing blows as long as Bone Offering is active, which it should be all the time as long as you are casting Arcanist Brand once in a while. Using cast when stunned like this is usually way more reliable than cast when damage taken, and it doesn't have a mana multiplier or level restriction like cast when damage taken does. Speaking of defensive layers, not only am I block and spell block capped, I'm also suppression capped and using a loyalty tattoo of Ahuana. This summons a minion whenever you suppress spell damage that buffs your spell suppression damage prevention. I've tested this and it scales with your existing suppression damage prevention, making it more effective if you have the Mastery and the Inveterate notable passive. I don't have Inveterate anymore because I swapped my Anoint for Charisma to squeeze in more auras. The reason I was able to cap suppression so easily is because the Green Nightmare in this socket combined with the right tattoos gives 34% spell suppression alone. And finally, for our last defensive layer, the build has a solid 12,000 armor without flasks, and about 26,000 to 27,000 with flasks active. And of course, these are all gain 3 charges when hit flasks. Because this is a life on block build, it can take a lot of hits. When it's getting hit by a lot of small hits, it basically is immortal. It will recover more life than the amount of damage it's taking, and it will constantly be filling up the flasks and just making sure they are basically always active while mapping. With the rest of my tattoos, I basically fixed my attributes, Chaos Resist, Mana Reservation, and then got some Curse Reduction and Ignite Duration Reduction with whatever I had left over. I'm still considering using a flask to deal with Ignite though, because some Ignites can be kind of scary, especially since I'm running Leafy Shade, which doubles the duration of ailments on me, including Ignites. I used to have 100% reduced Ignite duration from tattoos down here, but had to give that up to cap suppression without using an Anoint on my amulet. As you can see now, I also have 3 Spectres walking around. That's because I was able to get my Spectre gem up to level 25. This is with a 21 gem, plus 1 from Ashes, plus 1 from the All Intelligent Skill Gems tattoo, and then finally a plus 2 minion helmet. So for those Spectres, I've now added a Wild Bristle Matron on top of the Pale Seraphim and Ancient Suffering that I was already using. There isn't really another damage Spectre available for this build, and Wild Bristle Matron is the best defensive Spectre, so that's what I added. My Animate Guardian is a really basic setup with Dying Breath, Leercast, Southbound, Doppelganger Guys, and Crafted Boots with Sapped Ground. It basically never gets even close to dying because of the constant life recovery from Life from Death. Since I'm summoning so many minions with SRS and they're dying so frequently, that causes the Animate Guardian to basically always be topped up on life, on top of its huge regen that it gets from Doppelganger Guys. I ran the numbers, and Dying Breath plus Leercast actually adds more damage than Kingmaker on this build, so I'm not even going to bother with the more expensive AG setup. The plus 10 fortification from Kingmaker would be really nice, but that's about it. This build is already dot capped on Pinnacle bosses when Valhaste is up, meaning that all that's left to improve on the build is defenses, which are already great. I suppose you could try to push the Uber boss DPS even higher, but I'm just not interested in doing that. It already clears them easily anyway. So that's basically the whole build. I've invested somewhere around 100 Divine in it probably by now, but it was fully ready to clear all content with around a dozen Divine total. Speaking of investment, while I was crafting my gloves, I kind of accidentally crafted probably the best dominating blow gloves that have ever existed. That minion damage implicit could be changed to intimidate or additional strike targets or anything more suited to the rest of the stats on the gloves. I think these are actually worth a ton of currency to the right player, but I'm also not done using them myself yet. So just to be clear again, while there is a lot of currency invested into this character now, you don't need anywhere close to this level of investment to be able to clear all the main endgame content, including Ubers. If you check out my previous video on this character, that shows a much more reasonable level of investment, and that was able to clear the Feared and basically everything else. I just wanted to put out this update, just to put this out there to show what the character looks like when it is mostly min-maxed. This build exceeded all of my expectations, and I have no real issues whatsoever with the build. One final little thing to mention is that the Guardian Ascendancy node here isn't really doing much for me except for some regen, which is nice by the way. My block chance is capped without it as long as Bone Offering is active. Other good options instead of this would be Raider or Gladiator. Raider would make it easier to cap suppression, but it's already pretty easy. Gladiator would push max block even higher, which is actually a big extra chunk of effective HP, but that's all it does. Champion is pretty okay for damage too, but like I said, the build doesn't need any more damage. It's already dot capped. So like I said, that's basically it. I already have a couple more characters rolled up that I might make videos on. Like I said, it took me a while to get around to actually making this video on this character. It's been done for a while. But first, I think my next video is going to be something a little different from what I normally post. Like I said earlier, I'll leave an Uber Shaper fight at the end of this video. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.